Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Greece once again for the first time in what feels like a good long while. So we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a couple of times before. I would say that these guys are potentially the best known Greek craft brewery, at least across the European continent, and they're best known for the different kinds of IPAs, both West Coast and New England hazy, but also in recent times they've been doing a lot of different Imperial stouts, and they had a few of those back in the day, but I've noticed they've intensified this in recent times. But the one we're going to have a look at today is a style that I haven't tried from them before. It's also part of a series of beers that I've heard is very good, and one that I also haven't covered on the channel before, but this one has got some very high ratings and very good write-ups, so needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head down to Corfu, which is off the west coast of Greece, one of the Greek islands, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Seven Islands Brewery. So this particular beer comes from their Beast Mode series. It is called Kravgi, which in English is like scream, shout, or I'm guessing it probably can mean roar as well, going by the artwork on the beer. But this one comes in at 12% ABV, and they're describing this one as an Imperial pastry stout with coffee beans, pecan nuts, peanuts, vanilla beans, tonka beans, and roasted carob pod powder. So yeah, this should be a really quite interesting one. Now, this is part of their, as you said, this is part of their Beast Mode series. There's quite a few of these beers from what I've seen, and I bought this one in Kiosk over in Copenhagen, and they had quite a few of them, but this was the one that just kind of caught my interest because of the, you know, the vanilla beans, the tonka beans, and the coffee. Those are things I really like in Imperial stouts, actually. So yeah, this was the one out of the four, I think it was, that was of most interest to me, and I've been sitting on this for a wee while, of course, but now we're going to have a taste of it, which I'm very much looking forward to. But yeah, my very first Imperial stout from Seven Island Brewery, and yeah, I'm sure we'll review more from these guys at some point in the future. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. Always nice to review some Greek beers for you here on the channel as well. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Seven Island Brewery before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future because I do like this brewery. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Simply go up to the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like, and if I've reviewed beers from your local area, they will pop up. And of course it is done in the native languages of all the countries as well. So yeah, you can have a look at that. Otherwise you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Greek playlist along with a number of other things, and we will hopefully add more to that at some point in the very near future. But yeah, let's go on and have a little look at my brewery notes then. So, Seven Island Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Corfu, and the company was founded back in 2013 by Lefteris Terry Mezimeris and Konstantin Pugatsis. So Lefteris apparently started homebrewing back in about 2009, and he says that he just loves creating his own beers from scratch and that he's addicted to craft beer. So apparently his favourite styles are Imperial stouts, but also double IPAs, along with some of the more kind of modern fruity sour beers as well, and he just kind of got really into experimenting, and after a few years of home brewing, he went on to study at the Institute of Brewing and Distilling in 2015. So in the first few years of operation, the brewery won both Best New Brewery in the World and also the Best Brewery from Greece from Rate Beer in 2017, which is quite impressive when you think about how American dominated that site actually is. But the Citra Blast, which was their kind of original flagship IPA, a lovely West Coast IPA, that one, check out if you get the chance. This also entered the best 100 beers in the world and was for a period of time rated as the best beer from Greece. I'm not sure if it still is actually, but it was a very highly rated beer at the time, and like I say, it is lovely. But over the course of 2017, they were Gypsy Brewing, and then they moved into their own facility in Corfu in 2018 as well. They've got a barrel aging program in the new brewery, and so this was the point when they started producing a number of Imperial Stouts, but they've also done a number of collaboration brews over the years as well. But the brewery is named after the 7 Ionian islands, which are distinct for having been under Venetian rule rather than Ottoman rule, and this meant that they developed quite a distinctive culture actually, which is more in line with Italian influences than Turkic influences, I guess we could say, as you sometimes find in the Balkan region of Europe. But in recent times, these guys have been producing a number of their beers at Frau Gruber in Augsburg, or near Augsburg, I should say, in the south of Germany. And yeah, that's helped them kind of increase their volume and get their beers out there a little bit more, actually. But as of January 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 62 different kinds of beer. And like I mentioned to you earlier, they are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy IPAs these days, and also their big Imperial Stouts. But yeah, this is the first time we're looking at one of their Imperial Stouts. I've never tried that style from them before, but it is one that we do need to see about exploring a little bit more from them. I think they've done 1 or 2 barley wines as well, and I would love to try those. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Seven Island Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. Probably it's best to follow them on Facebook and Instagram, because that's where you get the most updates from Terry and things like that. He's a very enthusiastic guy, very, very nice when I've spoken to him. And yeah, you can also check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on then and have a little look at this beer itself. So this one is a 440ml can. I forget exactly how much I paid for this one, but like I say, I bought this at Kiosk in Denmark, so probably a fair little bit actually, especially when you consider the exchange rate these days. But there you can see the Seven Island Brewery symbol, which is pretty cool, and there you can see the lovely artwork with this one, the lovely blue lion. I might need to keep this can, but there you can see, as I was saying, this beer is part of their, wait, is that the wrong way around? Yeah, this is part of their Beast Mode series. So there you go. Yeah, as I said, I think there was about 4, maybe 5 of these beers in the Beast Mode series. But like we said earlier, this one is called the Kravgi, which means like shout, scream, I guess roar as well. It can probably mean, just going by the artwork. But yeah, this is an Imperial Pastry Stout at 12% ABV, coffee beans, pecan nuts, peanuts, vanilla beans, tonka beans, and roasted carob pod powder. So yeah, this should be quite nice. Interestingly, tonka beans are banned in the US when you think about all the stuff that goes into their food. But it's you know, it's kind of funny that tonka beans are banned in the US. But yeah, as you guys will know, having watched the channel for a while, I absolutely love Imperial coffee stouts. And you know, trying my first stout from a brewery that I know is very good, and especially one with a bit of vanilla, tonka and coffee in it, you can't really go wrong with this. So hopefully this beer lives up to my expectations that I have from this brewery. But just look at that. That has to be one of the blackest stouts I've ever seen. That's just ridiculous. Okay. Well, I think we'll leave a little bit of it in the can so that we can get a little bit of foam out of it later. But let's just see how this goes. So before the head disappears, because I can see it's starting to do that, you can see that it poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, very dark tan coloured head. Just look at that. You can see it there, some kind of medium bubbles on the surface and a few smaller ones just going further up, but that head is fading away quite quickly. You can see it's leaving a nice ring around the edge of the glass, but yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of that head there. But overall, it does look pretty nice. But you can see this beer is pretty much black as night. If you shine the light through this one, there's a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, yeah, a little bit of a Coca-Cola Pepsi coloured edge to it, which is quite interesting. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, as I said, and a few little ones going up toward it. But yeah, this is definitely one of the blackest Imperial Stouts I think that I've ever come across. So remember, when it comes to the colour of your beer, that's determined by 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel agent that you do or any adjuncts that you put in can affect that too. When it comes to Imperial Stouts, right enough, it's a little bit difficult to actually affect the colour of these ones in the same way that you can with, say, a barley wine or something a little bit lighter than that, because you know the black malt does most of the work there. But I wouldn't doubt that the cocoa nibs, probably the coffee will as well. That's probably given some shade of blackness to this beer, definitely. But yeah, it looks absolutely beautiful. This one, the head has almost completely disappeared, and you've got that nice ring around the edge of the glass too. But overall, it does look very nice, this one, I have to say that. So yeah, let's have a wee look at the aroma of this beer and just see how it gets, how we go with it. I'm very, very curious about this one. It looks absolutely beautiful. I'm curious as to whether this beer contains oat and wheat right enough, just from the thing with this, because this beer is not transparent in the slightest. Yeah, it's got oats in it, so that'll probably be why this beer doesn't really have much of a kind of transparency to it, if that makes sense. That'll be why it's so opaque. But let's have a wee look at the aroma of this one and just see what we have out of this beer. I think this is going to be a bit of a monster. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, this beer smells absolutely beautiful. So, one thing I should point out actually is that the Imperial Pastry Stout is not my favourite style of beer. When it comes to Imperial Stouts, pardon me, I'm a lot more inclined to go with you know, an Imperial Coffee Stout, an Imperial Milk Stout, or an old school RIS, a Russian Imperial Stout. Pastry Stouts, sometimes the ones that have these kind of more granola type flavours to them just don't sit with me. So for me, for a good, I have had some really nice pastry stouts in fairness, but for me they've got to be properly balanced, and I think that was the main reason why I wanted to go with this one, because it had the coffee and it had all the beans and stuff in it. So we'll need to see how this beer actually turns out, but the aroma is really, really nice. And I find this beer does have a little bit of that kind of candied, like marzipan. Yeah, it's got a little bit of that sort of like marzipan-y, candied, granola-y type thing that you would associate with Imperial Pastry Stouts. But let's try and break this aroma down a wee bit and just describe it a wee bit more in depth. So if you get, just when you get a little whiff of it, this is the interesting thing, when you're further away from it, you just get a little whiff, you get that very candied, marzipan-y, cakey sort of thing. But when you actually go closer into it, you smell all the different adjuncts in the beer. So the backbone of this one, you definitely get a little bit of that kind of toasty, kind of cake edge. If you think about the sort of cakey, roasty stuff that gets stuck on the edge of the baking tray, it's kind of like that. But then you've got a little bit of a kind of chocolate brownie sitting on top of that one, like kladdkaka, Swedish chocolate cake. There's definitely some of that going on in there. So toasty cake, a little bit of a more kind of sticky kladdkaka type thing. Within that, you've got a little bit of nuttiness for sure. Yeah, definitely, yeah. You've got a little bit of a kind of, yeah, there's a good little bit of nuttiness to it. You know, you've got the pecans. What was the other one? Was it just peanuts they said in this one? Yeah, peanuts and pecan nuts. So yeah, you can smell the nutty character in this one quite distinctively. I'm not a big fan of nuts, I have to say that as well. I don't usually eat them, but I think they can add some really nice flavours into these beers. But you can definitely smell that big nutty element as well. On top of that, you can smell the tonka beans and the vanilla sort of mixing together. You can smell the sort of fibrous character. I think that's the only way I can really think to describe tonka beans. They're very distinctive. They've got this really smooth sort of fibrous character to them. And then you can smell the vanilla mixing in with that further forward on the nose. The coffee in this one, I would say, is very, very subtle. But you guys know that I've watched the channel for a while that coffee beans are potentially my favourite adjunct that you can put into stouts. You know, coffee beans are as complex as hops. It depends on where they're grown in the world. You've got different water profiles, different soil profiles. You also need to think about the mazel, the metres above sea level at which it's grown, and things like this as well. You know, you can get aromatic notes, red fruity notes, you know, earthy notes and all of this kind of thing. So coffee beans are fascinating, but the coffee in this one is actually really, really subtle in terms of contributing to the aroma. So yeah, the way this beer goes together for me is really it's really interesting. So yeah, lovely. The coffee notes in this one though, there's a little bit of earthiness to it. I get a little touch of red fruit, and it has got a wee bit of aromaticity. But like I say, I've got a feeling that the coffee beans in this one are going to come out more in the actual flavour of the beer. There is a little bit of a kind of treacly molasses and chocolate note to this one. When it comes to the chocolate, I think it's maybe about a 70-ish% cocoa chocolate. It smells like dark chocolate further back on the nose, but further forward you're getting a wee bit of milky chocolate because of the presence of the vanilla, and the tonka beans will probably contribute to that as well. But on the brown sugary side of things, there's quite a little bit of treacly molasses character to this one. It's a little bit leathery as well, which indicates there's potentially been a bit of a longer wort boil going on in here. And as I say, the longer you boil the wort, the more you caramelise the sugars within it. But yeah, it's interesting, this one. The more the aroma opens up, the more you get some of the different adjuncts and things like that. But it's a beautiful smelling beer, I have to say that. From the malty and adjuncty side of things, it is really nice. Yeah. On the hoppy, when it comes to the hoppy side of the beer then, as always, you wouldn't expect an Imperial Stout, especially an Imperial Pastry Stout, to be overly hoppy, but there is a little bit of presence to the green component in this one. There's a little bit of smooth earthiness in there, there's a little bit of herbal character, and you've also got a wee touch of floral. You've also got a wee touch of floral aromaticity, and a little bit of grassiness too. So, yeah, a wee bit of that. I don't think there's anything else to say about the green component of this beer. But on the fruity side of things, definitely some nice kind of sharper raisin in there, but for me a lot of plum. You have got some of these kind of phenolic, you know, boozy Christmas cakey elements coming out of this one. Yeah, big boozy Christmas cakey elements to this beer for sure. I always remind that my dad used to love having Christmas pudding for his birthday in February, and you know, we used to eat some of this, and the aroma of this beer really reminds me of my mum's Christmas pudding that she would make. But yeah, yeah, big, as I say, just big phenolic notes out of this one. A lot of plum, good little bit of pruny and datey dry character as well. Some sweeter figs, and definitely a little bit more of a kind of blackberry sharpness to this one too. But aroma-wise, it's a really, really interesting beer, this one. I'm just very curious to see exactly how all the flavours come out of this one. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them. But yeah, I think this one should be really quite interesting. So yeah, this is good. This should be good. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy that aroma, but we are going to get stuck into this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Kravgi, an Imperial Pastry Stout at 12% ABV with coffee beans, pecans, peanuts, vanilla, tonka, and roasted carob powder in it as well. Carob will be giving you some of the chocolate in this, of course. But yeah, this one, 12% Imperial Pastry Stout from Seven Island Brewery in Corfu in Greece. Let's get stuck in. Sláinte, skål, cheers, yamas. Damn. That has to be one of the thickest Imperial Stouts that I've ever come across. That's ridiculous. Oh yeah, it's like drinking syrup. It's lovely though. In terms of Imperial Pastry Stouts, that is really, really nice. That's potentially the best Imperial Pastry Stout I've had. You know, if you gave me something like this, it could change my opinion about the Imperial Pastry Stout as a style. But this is, I say, a lot of this style for me is quite hit and miss. If they're done like this, yeah, they're great. But if they're made like too sweet and too kind of granola-y, if that makes sense, then they just don't do it for me. Yeah, but this is definitely a very, very nice beer. So a big thumbs up to Seven Island Brewing for this one. This is an absolute monster. But knowing these guys, it doesn't surprise me that this is good. The New England triple IPA that I had from them, which I'm pretty sure was the last review I did from this brewery, that was the Revenge of the Hopzilla. That was it. That was awesome. Like the creaminess you got in that was just ridiculous. So I'm really not surprised that Seven Island can do a very good Imperial Stout as well. But this beer is actually older than that. I can't remember how long I've had this one, but yeah. As I say, this is absolutely lovely. So this beer gets a big, big thumbs up from me. I need to keep an eye on what these guys are doing in terms of Imperial Stouts. But I'd love to see, I would love to see them do, some barley wines and Scotch ales and Doppelbocks and stuff like this. I'd love to see them do that. They have done a Pilsner, from what I saw as well. So I'd love to have a go at that. I've really been getting into my lagers again recently. But yeah, I think it was called Island Pills, if I remember what was on the Untappd list right. But this is a beautiful beer. Let's try and just break this down and describe it a wee bit more in depth for you. So, middle of your palate then, middle third of your palate. This is one of these beers that's actually very similar in terms of its flavour composition to what you get in the aroma. So the backbone of the beer, you do get a little bit of a kind of roasty toasty well-fired bread crust in there, which is good. So yeah, roasty toasty well-fired bread crust. On top of that, there's a little bit of woodiness in there. And then you start to get the kind of cakey layer out of this one. It is kind of like, it's more like a chocolate muffin. In the aroma, it gave you the impression that it was more one of those oily Swedish kladdkakas or, you know, a chocolate brownie or something. But yeah, you get the roasty black malt there. Then you get this sort of airy chocolate muffiny layer. But then above that, you do, in fairness, get a slightly more dense and sticky layer that's a bit more akin to a chocolate brownie or kladdkaka or something like that. And toward the front of that, like sort of kladdkaka chocolate brownie layer, that's when you start to get the different nuts out of this one, the pecans and the peanuts. So that definitely sits there a bit further forward on the middle third of your palate. So yeah, that's nice. The more you drink of this beer, the more it kind of sweetens up as well. And of course, as the beer warms up, you'll start to get more out of it too. But yeah, above that thick, dense, cakey layer, you start to get the above this the kind of dense, cakey layer, you start to get, you can feel the layer of chocolate there too. So at the back of that middle third of your palate, you can feel there's quite a high percentage cocoa chocolate there, you know, sort of 80-90%. You definitely get a wee bit of the dryness there. But the carob powder, I think, is also going to contribute to that as well, because you can feel the chocolate has a wee bit of dryness. And I remember we used to have chocolate for the, we used to have carob chocolate in Australia that we gave to the dogs, and it was lovely actually. I tried a little bit of the dog chocolate and it was just straight up carob. They loved it as well. But yeah, you can feel that bit more dry carob chocolate thing on the back of the palate there, but on top of that, you do get some of the more kind of rich, darker, high cocoa chocolate flavours out of this beer. So I like that for sure. But yeah, as you move further forward on the palate, you can feel the chocolate just mellows out a little bit. And you start to get, as you come forward, you can feel the sort of fibrousy character of the tonka beans. And the tonka beans just have this really rich, it's strange to say it's a beany texture, but yeah, you can feel that the sort of chocolatey layer. I think there's a carrot, I think there's you've got the carob at the back and then the darker chocolate on top, and then as you move further forward, the carob is kind of replaced by the tonka bean fibrous sort of thing. And then as you move further forward, you can feel the chocolate just creeps over. The chocolate just kind of creeps over the, yeah, it really creeps over the tonka bean sort of flavours. But within that, particularly toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you really start to get the kind of vanilla notes out of the beer. And the nuts, of course, sit down a little bit more deeply in the kind of sticky, cakey layer that we were talking about earlier. So yeah, the sort of chocolatey layer in this beer is interesting, because yeah, you've got the carob and then the tonka bean. I think the carob sits a bit further back on the palate, then you've got the tonka bean further forward, and you've got the oily, chocolatey layer just sitting above it. So yeah. So, yeah, that is really quite nice in this one. But above all of that, you start to get the brown sugary notes out of the beer. So there's like a big circle. There's a big circle in the middle of the palate with this one, where you can feel, yeah, you've got a big, You've got that big circle in the middle of your palate there. You've got a sort of leathery brown sugary character underneath it. So yeah, nice leathery brown sugary note underneath that, which indicates there's been a slightly longer wort boil there. But above that, you get lots and lots of treacle and molasses. And this, of course, is where the alcohol in the beer is kind of covered. But as I say, the middle third of your palate in this beer is the most complex part of it. And this is where you get all these different layers of flavour and things like that. One thing we haven't covered in this one, though, is the... one thing we haven't covered in this beer, really, though, is the coffee bean notes. So, yeah, I do like how this goes together in that sense too. So we'll move on to the back third of the palate now, but the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that little bit of kind of bready build up in there. It's like a chocolate muffin again, but all the coffee bean notes for me kind of come out in there. And the coffee beans in this one, they sort of just add a little bit more depth to the beer. They don't take over the entire flavour, which I think is quite nice. So yeah, the coffee bean for me, it's a little bit aromatic. You've also got some juicy kind of reddish berry fruits in this one. And it's got just a little bit of earthiness to it as well. But like I say, the coffee just sits toward the back, kind of toward, the back of the middle third of your palate, but also the little bit of, you know, in that border region too. But let's look at the base of the back third of your palate then. So, yeah, base of the back third of your palate, you get a nice kind of, as I say, a roasty toasty, yeah, a little bit of a roasty toasty, well-fired bread crusty sort of thing. So you've got that. Then above that, you get the sort of chocolate muffiny, cakey layer. You can feel that's definitely there. Then you get the more dense, you get that more dense Kladkirke type layer, but you can feel that's a little bit taller and a little bit more airy. And you can feel that some of the coffee bean smoothness just kind of creeps over that into the back third of the palate as well. So yeah, you get a bit more of a kind of smooth earthiness and a little touch of aromaticity in the coffee layer in the back third of the palate too. Above all of that, you start to get some more airy notes there. There's a little bit of that kind of honeycomb thing that I always seem to get on the back third of the palate. But yeah, you've got this really light, airy, very kind of chocolate spongy type flavour above everything else on the back third of the palate. But yeah, definitely, the back third of the palate, the flavour is a bit taller and more airy, but then it condenses down quite a wee bit and squashes together as you go into the middle third of your palate with this one. But I find that in all the beers actually. I tend to get a bit more yeasty character at the back of the palate. So yeah, that is interesting. But yeah, let's have a wee look at the hoppy side of the beer. I think we've covered everything we need to say about the adjunct and kind of malty side of this one. So let's look at the hoppy side of the beer. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of a slightly herbal character, but then as you move further forward, it does gradually transition to be a bit more kind of floral. Round the front curve of the tongue, it's a bit lighter and grassy, but again, an Imperial pastry stout is not the most hop forward of beers. We have to say that. So yeah, that's worth bearing in mind. On the fruity side of things then, the border region between middle and front third of your palate, I think we said everything we need about the green component. You do get a little bit of that kind of cakey build up. Again, it's a little bit chocolate muffiny-like, it's a little bit sort of chocolate brownie-like, and the base of that front third of your palate is definitely more, yeah, you've got a little bit of a kind of smoother, yeah, you've got a wee bit of nice kind of smoothness to this one as well, which I think is pretty good. So yeah, a little bit of kind of cakey bread crusty note there, a wee bit of kind of smoothness too, and then yeah, you've also got yeah, you also have that nice how would we say, what's the word I'm looking for, you've also just got a little bit of that kind of like brown, you get a little bit of a brown wholemeal bready character there too, but then above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters from the hops just roll their way out. So let's look at the fruity side of the beer to round off. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you definitely get a more, you absolutely get more of that kind of Christmas puddingy, you know, boozy, chocolate cakey type note out of the beer. But yeah, when you bring it in, you do get I get a little bit of plum, like an oily plum. Underneath that though, definitely prunes, you know, dried plums, and then some daty kind of characters as well. But as you move further forward, as you move further forward from the kind of daty pruny side of things, you've got a little bit of a more, you start to get a little bit of a kind of like sultana type note to the beer, a little bit of that kind of, you know, dry white green grapey note. But as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a kind of figgy quality and some black currants, and then you've got oily black berries just sitting on top of that. So yeah. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense is really quite nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. So yeah, interesting fruity character with this one. And you do, the further into the aftertaste you go, you do get the sense that this is an Imperial pastry stout. You do start to get a wee bit of that kind of marzipan-y, granola-y type undertone that these beers can give you. I'm still not sure how I feel about that, but the other flavours you get out of this beer for me are very, very nice. Really am more a fan of, like I say, Imperial coffee stouts, RISs and Imperial milk stouts and things, but I will say this is a very, very nicely done beer. So yeah, it gets a big thumbs up from me. I'm not surprised. Seven Island are damn good. These guys are a damn good brewery, one of the best in Europe just now for sure. So they are definitely worth trying if you haven't done so already. But yeah, to round off this review with a mouthfeel then, this beer is definitely full-bodied. It's a big kind of slick, oily type beer, this one, that's for sure. Yeah, big kind of slick, oily beer, this one. There is a little bit of creaminess to it in a sense when it's an Imperial Stout too. So does this one have lactose in it actually? No. I would have thought it did. You know, almost gives the impression that it has a wee bit of a lactosey character to it. But yeah, lovely lactosey character. And they're like, you know, big, just thick, oily slickness, but at the same time it comes across a little bit creamy. There is a wee bit of bitterness to this beer, I have to say, which I do quite like. So you do get a little bit of bitterness out of this beer from the coffee beans, from the black malt, obviously, and there is a wee bit of it from the hoppy character too. But it's not overly bitter. I think it's maybe about 40-ish IBUs. But yeah, there's a bit of dryness from the malt too. The malt, as I said, a little bit of dryness, bit of toastiness. Pardon me, lots of sweetness. And kind of an oily character as well. You get this from all the adjuncts, and the fruity notes are a little bit phenolic, as we've said. And yeah, you've also got just the big oily character and the fruity side of things too. But a lovely, lovely beer, this one. And if any beer was going to change my mind about Imperial pastry stouts, this one has the potential to do it, absolutely. Still not a massive fan of the Imperial pastry stout style, but you know, this beer could make me think about that a little bit. It's more the aftertaste. The actual flavour of the beer is really nice. The aftertaste, I have to say, just is not my favourite of aftertaste. Just the sort of marzipan-y and kind of granola type thing that you get in the aftertaste with this beer. But otherwise, yeah, beautiful, beautiful beer, this one. If it was an Imperial milk stout and it didn't have an aftertaste quite like this, you know, this would probably be the perfect Imperial stout for me. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Kravgi, a 12% Imperial pastry stout with lots of different things in it. Coffee beans, pecan, peanuts, vanilla beans, tonka beans, and also some roasted carob from Seven Island Brewery in Corfu in Greece. Lovely beer, this one, and I can feel it going to my head just now, so I think we should end it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Seven Island Brewery as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point in the near future. Do give me some Greek brewery and beer recommendations in the comment section below as well, and we'll see about getting some more Greek stuff on the channel too. But until then, slange it, skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review.